All right. Welcome, everybody. It is November 30th, week 10 since EOS independence. It's another node operator roundtable today. Last week, we discussed we got the notes here. The technical discussion on state database trimming. Left some notes here for those who want to catch up. Also, the recording is available. And I believe there are some issues we already saw being opened up coming out of that conversation in the ENF repos. So that's awesome to see. This week on the agenda, suggested by Matthew, is a discussion on what statistics should be added to the Prometheus exporter in Leap 4.0. Kind of the problem there is that Node EOS is a black box. We have no idea what's happening. Let's provide some statistics. And the ask was to bring a list of what you'd like to have in Prometheus for this call. So we can talk about that. Before we get into that, as we normally do, I don't know if there's any relevant updates on software development progress from the ENF side.
Yeah, I'll chime in right quick and say that there's really no material updates for this week. Of course, Leap 3.2 is and has been out. I believe I'll have a more material update around the CDT release timeline in next week's meeting. I may also have some updates for system contracts in Dune. We're definitely shifting our focus back that direction. So again, I think next week we'll have just more to say about those.
Let me put Kevin on the spot. And I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving, Kevin. And so I'm hoping you actually didn't get this done because you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. But I know you've been looking at running the new benchmark code with 3.2 against 3.1 to just talk in terms of on a same node setup, like a relative percent increase or decrease. Did you have a chance to run that through yet, or maybe in a week or so?
Yeah, I've run it a few times. Operator error last night didn't get me good results. Issues with our actual performance harness didn't get me results before that we've been fixing. So I've been debugging our performance harness. And then last night I just screwed up. I copied a 3.1 into place to use, but I didn't actually copy it into place to use. So I got results from 4.0 last night. Again, which I verified that I'm getting stable results from my 4.0 test. So,
okay, maybe next week we'll get to hear some interesting results. Of course, we'll hide them if they're bad, but we're assuming I'm teasing when I say that. I know we're on video here. We're confident that they're going to show performance improvements from 3.2 over 3.1.
Yeah, that's the hope. I definitely I can pretty confidently say that we're seeing performance improvements from 2.0 to 3.x, pick your flavor at least like the main branch. There's significant performance improvements over 2.0 for sure.
And in time, you'll even quantify those for us. There's just got to be some retrofitting done on the performance harness to go back to the state history plugin and using that from the 2.x releases. So in time, we'll know 2.0, 2.1, 3.1 and 3.2 in terms of relative terms on a single node machine. Thank you, Kevin.
One interesting thing that has already come out of that performance evaluations that we're doing is, at least on our initial testing, the increasing the producer thread count seems to have a significant impact in performance, which is something that we were never able to measure before. I know any time that we tried to measure that before, we didn't actually difference between increasing those back in the day, back in that other company that some of us used to work for. So, but yeah, the producer threads, increasing that at least on my machine from the default of 2 to 6, significantly increased TPO.
So does that mean, because there was a common tactic of pinning the producer Node OS to a single thread to hot rod it, is that now going to be potentially detrimental?
I don't don't think so. The producer thread pool that we use is used for one thing and really one thing only, and that's signature validation on transactions as they come into a node, which you want to be a low priority sort of thing anyway, as you kind of spawn them up.
That was already multi-threaded, wasn't it?
It is multi-threaded, right, which is why it has the tunable thread count. It just, I mean, and what we're doing, we're pushing the node way beyond anything you're going to see even remotely close to on a public
Hold my beer.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers, I probably shouldn't say the numbers I'm seeing on my machine. They're quite remarkable. Now it is single producer and yada yada yada, but I mean, you have to remember, and I don't know how much we want to go to in this call, but on the public networks, they're artificially constrained to just under 4,000 TPS, and that's simply just settings that we could change at some point. You know, on a public.
Don't cut yourself short, my man.
Some other Leap news, not EOS related. Yesterday, the Telos public blockchain upgraded to Leap successfully, as far as I can tell. So good news for Leap adoption on public networks. I'm not sure, is it now just those two, EOS and Telos, are the only two public chains that have Leap activated, as far as I know?
Kevin, did Wax kind of out of self-defense get up to 3.2?
Not on the
contract level. Matthew's here. He can talk to that more than I can, probably. I mean, they upgraded, but no, they still haven't activated any of the protocol features, so they're still effectively on the old EOS.io protocol. But some of them are running. Well, Matthew speaking for you here, but he's actually running 3.2 on some of his nodes. Others are running 3.1. Others, I think, are still running flavors of 2. So,
they've got some 3, but no protocol upgrade.
Yeah, and I mean, big difference is you know, most of the node operators at this point have migrated to the 3 platform, 1 or 2, even across most of the Antelope networks, just because us node operators do what we got to do, unless it's custom built. But I would say the majority of them haven't even really fully committed to what's it going to take to upgrade all of our system contracts. And, you know, because there's a whole domino effect, like we saw Telos have to go through to, you know, kind of catch back up. EOS was a little further ahead. So anyway, but node operators and, you know, I mean, the layer 2s and all of that, for the most part, a lot of us are already, running 3.1 or 3 dot somethings, or a flavor of it like it is on Wax. But no, the protocols haven't been, because the system contracts on Wax, which is what Telos actually just finished completing, and then running through test nets and testing and activated the fork that actually forked last night. I don't know, it all blurs together, but
yeah, less than 12 hours ago, I believe.
Yeah, so
maybe a little more, actually. Sorry.
Which led to a lot of, some of the, cleanup of the repos, but because of the MSIG versions and stuff like that, right? I mean, it was great in reblazing some trails on the backside of it, which is going to, make it easier for a lot of the other chains to kind of catch up, and lessons learned going forward. So, but yeah, they've been working on it, because they got a heavy set of customized contracts. So, that's why they really had to catch a lot of things up, and test it. So anyway, exciting news. Yeah, like I say.
Yeah.
I think
Congrats
Ross really
to
kind
the
of
Leap
helped out with that if he was
protocol,
on
to the
here.
Antelope. Yeah, Ross did a great job, kind of herding the cats there, making sure everyone was ready to go.
And executing. Guilty.
Oh,
right.
It wasn't Max this time. It was you.
Yeah. I was a little bit nervous. I was like, am I going to be responsible for bringing down the network?
Man, that's a privilege, not a burden. Come on, man.
Well, all of you are sleeping, right?
No, I was putting Princess to bed though. At the time I think it got executed, I was like, but then
No, I was sitting beside the computer. I was watching. Everything's going good. The only node that stopped was our 2.0 snapshot node, which is the one that's expected to stop because, well, it's not producing 2.0 snapshots anymore. But everything else is fine.
That's exactly how ours was. So it's like, and Minion got it updated and rolled over, so we're back in action. But yeah, we're pretty smooth, but obviously takes a lot of coordination and dev work. So congrats to that whole team.
Yeah, congrats.
Is Wax planning on doing that soon? Anybody? No.
Yeah,
I just don't know what
contract.
Soon is. I posted in the
it's trademark
developers chat, and I said months, and then someone commented months. It's going to be less than that. Okay, so
soon.
On a private chain note, I've heard from Rick Whitner that Voice did upgrade to Leap 3.1. Obviously, it's a single node setup, and there are no protocol features to enable because it's not really talking a protocol. But at least they've successfully upgraded their side chain that they use to Leap.
Cool. All right. Well, congrats to the Antelope protocol. Let's get into the main topic here. What statistics should we add to the Prometheus exporter in Leap 4.0?
Is broken Boolean, yes or no?
A little more granular might be better. I'm not sure. Is broken, seems easy. Everything is awesome or not?
I'm cool with that.
Does anyone want to maybe give a little bit of context for noobs like me who I don't even know what the Prometheus exporter is? If there's maybe some less technical people watching and following along the call.
Kevin should be able to do that. Kevin's team is actually working it. I guess Chris Gunlock is doing it. Is that right, Kevin?
He is, yeah. He's working on it. I've been reviewing it and giving some insight there. But the Prometheus is, and I wasn't really prepared for this discussion, but Prometheus is, and I don't know if it's a standard so much as just a particular implementation, but it's a tool for gathering statistics from a node. It's very popular apparently, and so it's basically just an HTTP endpoint that you can hit repeatedly and pull information. There's also a push mechanism, but we're not doing that part. We're just doing the pull because you can actually. It provides a push alternative, even if you only implement the pool. So that's really all we need to do on our side, and the rest can be tooling in the ecosystem. But so it just provides an endpoint for gathering statistics. Interesting enough, they're all integers, which is I found a little bit interesting. Like there's not support for getting strings, which I found.
Yes and no. You can work around that a little bit.
Little interesting that it had that kind of thing. It's also its own, like it's not JSON and it's not like an INI. It's its own text format, which is a little kind of interesting as well. But
it's like a time series database. I mean,
it is.
Think of it like an industrial level metrics. Like gauge stats and just kind of trending it over time. And it's really designed to be kind of light and simple. But yeah, it does. Prefer numbers.
Yeah, and what you feed into it, from our perspective, from the Nodius perspective, it's really just an HTTP RESTful endpoint that you hit and get statistics on whatever you want to provide, and then like what you're talking about, Michael, with the time series database and all that. That's all that's the Prometheus infrastructure you're running elsewhere. For the items that you instrument, like Nodius, it's really just hit an endpoint, gather some statistics at a given point in time, and then those get aggregated and collected elsewhere. So,
it's a very standard product that is open source and free that basically very regularly provides endpoint with all the metrics of that machine, CPU time used, memory, disk access, whatever you configure it to do. But it's really kind of the base, task manager type of statistics. But it's a great tool that's a lot of us admins kind of bolt in additional info in. So, oh, I want to monitor the NVMe lifecycle of my, drives. So it's added into the logic and gets published via this Prometheus, node exporter plugin, and of course on all the servers. And then it just gets collected into a master database on the back end and graphed and pretty and tracked or whatever. But node exporter is kind of one of the standards. It's like a lamp stack for Linux admins, for really easily collecting all the node information on the machine and then publishing it in its own JSON version, but it's kind of its own standard.
Yeah. So, what node operators are currently, scraping logs to get information, right? This is...
Well, we do a couple different things because it's in a couple different areas. Some are API, some are config files, some are log files. I mean, it's all over the place, some of the things we've looked for, but that's why we have this combo, right?
Right. So today, node operators are going they're using Prometheus to get some of their statistics, but then having to go to other places.
All the way around. We're scraping all those statistics and pumping them into Prometheus, and then that's the framework to use it. You know what I mean? But the problem is, where do you go and get that? It knows what the CPU is out of the box, and the memory and the network and all that. And you can bolt it to do whatever the hell you want, but, where is that? Is it a local API that gets queried? Is it the config file of Node OS that may be the only place that's really there? It may only have been something displayed in the startup of the node a month ago, whenever it fired up, and so that a lot of the info, health, feature, and monitoring is really just scattered. And if there were ways that you could just kind of dump that info out in that standard Prometheus format and idea, you could very quickly bolt into a whole feature set of, now I can see what's going on. That makes sense?
Daniel,
great.
If you want me to share my screen, I can show you the Prometheus exporter.
Sure. Let me make sure you've got sharing permission here.
You have a big Canadian flag in the background.
Big Canadian flag? Well, the browser has the Canadian theme.
Hey, that works.
Fair anyway, enough. So this is the one so this is live. Well, I hit refresh. It's live. So this is the one for EOS, our current active block producer. And for those of you who've been familiar with blockchain.stats.esnation.io, I know Michael doesn't use it, but many of you, other of you do. So that data comes from this Prometheus exporter. So like this first group of things here. So you can't put strings in, but you have to do it in this creative way of making it in a
gotta kind of tweak the system
thing. So there we go.
Y'all built a system that calculates all that, and then basically it's throwing that info and then gets
so exactly. So there's a whole separate process that collects all the data and then makes it available. So it's reading it from the Node.js INI files or APIs or log files, as Michael mentioned. So it's getting it from wherever and then making it available.
Do you run a Grafana or a Prometheus node that you could show the front end for people to see the graphs and stuff, or are you just looking at this raw data?
Yeah, hide all those alerts and KPIs of things that need to be fixed.
Well, we'll look at the public one.
There we go, Grafana.
Right, so here's, anybody can log in to this, and you can pick one of the nodes, and then you can see the details.
And that came out of the Prometheus plugin in those nodes, right?
Correct.
And did you write that Prometheus plugin because there wasn't one, you kind of adopted, made your own or something?
I did.
Yeah. So hopefully we're drafting.
Prometheus has a great node exporter. Really it has a great expansion mechanism that it'll take a file and read it, and as long as it's formatted properly, it basically appends it into all of this. So one of the options is to say, hey, go get all your own statistics and read this location for any .prom files or whatever to also pull in. So it's very easy to work all your magic on the side and then plop it in. I mean, my bash files do a great job of creating text files of all the data and then dumping it in there. The problem is
this one is actually there's an HTTP endpoint that does this. But yeah, you can do it that way too. Dump a file.
Matthew, would you drop the URL to that monitoring piece, the Grafana, into the chat? So folks can, because I know you make it where anybody can log in. I think I have a login to it. You just make the person register. People
force them to register. That's where our standoff has been for 2 years.
Well, it's just one register, and then it's not like you have to KYC yourself. All you got to do is make an account, for goodness sake.
Depends on who you talk to.
Maybe they KYC'd you.
I don't trust him with my personal info, to be honest.
Your email account? You don't trust someone with your email account?
Not. I mean, do you see his banner? He's Canadian.
I see that. I see the maple leaf.
I love it.
Yes, I will put it in the chat.
But that's why he says I don't use it. I love the stats. I just tell him you got to post screenshots because I can't log in.
But Grafana all of this is open source. Grafana is open source. Prometheus is open source. Brian, you in particular should be trailing along here and getting that node and doing that stuff. I love these open source products. I've used Zabbix and Prometheus and Grafana and stuff for years. So this is just amazing that it's there. And this just what's going to happen when we really expand this plugin. There hopefully will be more stats available, and people that are Grafana Prometheus users will just be able to get to more data more easily, and it'll just be available right out of the package. It won't be like Matthew has done, where he has added custom code to each of the nodes to be able to pull this.
I'm gonna shoot. I can't expose my private desktop dashboard, but I can maybe shoot it over to Daniel or something. He can post it, but you can monitor you'll see we monitor all of our proxy, information, the lag of all the servers, all sorts of different things you can do with it. But I just
like these charts here are new charts that were added in 3.2. So thanks to Kevin and the rest of the team.
Awesome.
New metrics in the logging. And so these generate nice new charts here.
Maybe if you didn't mind sharing all the metrics you're collecting currently, Matthew, and shared that back to Kevin to make sure that Chris is putting those all in. So the one that will come with the 3.3 release, or which now I think is going to be called the 4.0 release, will just have everything you've had in it, and then you won't have to do all the custom configuration each time you get a new node.
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting discussion because I'm not sure. Some of them are not easy to collect.
Right.
So
he actually does, but it's much more difficult. And there's two things I guess to look at monitoring. One is the status of the chain.
Yeah.
The other is the status of the node.
Right.
Now we roll it all together and whatever, but like a lot of what you're seeing there and a lot of the magic that they built and hard work, it doesn't sound like now 3.2 made it easy, but it's more trying to get kind of the health of the chain, how all the BPs are looking, holistically, but just looking at it from the log and, a contextual view versus exposing things about the node itself, features. It now does at least get info, exposes earliest block log available, things like that, in the log file. But there's a difference, and Nations is about the only one that tackled that holistic looking view, and they're just scraping the logs and then figuring things out. Or the Aloha monitor, that's how it kind of does. It latches on to state history and just kind of listens, and when it detects anomalies, fires stuff out. So anyway.
So Matthew, how would you explain the Prometheus plugin in Node.js? Like, what is the wish? What does it do? So at the moment you're scraping the logs, right? And you got it collating everything that you are able to pull into Grafana. What is it if we enable the plugin at Node.js? What's its function?
It makes it where you now have an HTTP endpoint that you hit. So Prometheus would prefer to hit an HTTP endpoint to collect data.
I think what he's asking is what's in it. What stats are in it?
No, not stats. Oh. Like, what is it like? Obviously, there's lots of stats. We know that there are lots of stats.
Right. It just makes the stats available over HTTP. It says, hit this endpoint and I'll shoot you back a specially formatted payload over HTTP that Prometheus will already know how to parse and stick into the database.
So my question is that Node.js does not know when or track when somebody has dropped a block per se. It's like in the log, something happened. It didn't actually go and say, hey, this is what's happened. Somebody's got low latency, high latency. It doesn't say anything like that, right?
Right.
So when you spin up this plugin,
it's not an alerting. It's a monitoring. So alerting is different, right? Alerting would push out to you like an SNMP trap. This is monitoring. You pull it and it tells you the latest stats on a whole bunch of metrics.
Okay. So is it almost like a stream in HTTP that you then have to in your graph? No? Okay. So there's some smarts in it.
You pull it. It doesn't push. There is a push mechanism as well. I believe that you could set up a receiver site and you could make it. I'm not 100% sure on that, Kevin. You'd have to let me know if you guys set it up where it can periodically post the stats to a receiver site. I think that's another thing that can be done in Prometheus as well. The way we're setting up the plugin, and Kevin, keep me honest here, is you would pull it periodically with some cron type job that you have running in Prometheus. In Prometheus, you can configure, go get these stats every minute, every 3 minutes.
Each one of them has an endpoint.
And it just
do that for like HA proxy. I mean, the same thing as HA proxy has its own kind of Prometheus node exporter pipe, and this just exposes it. But at least my opinion of what your question is it has no way of really providing true effective stats for the chain. It can only provide
for the node.
And I get that, but that means that Prometheus is running. There's another service.
No, yes, Prometheus is on a central server back in your data center. Prometheus has nothing to do with this plugin. So Prometheus what Prometheus is an open source network system management tool. You can use it to look at your entire network. It's not just for block producers.
I get that.
You can look at it for just your EC2 nodes, your local nodes, and your rack inside your data center. It looks at any type of statistics of your Linux, of your database, of you name it, your HTTP service.
I understand. I use Prometheus.
You have it. That's how I'm like.
I know. I'm just trying to understand Node.js's part in this, because that's what we're talking about.
There's a
Node.js plugin.
This plugin is just making all of the Node.js stats available on an HTTP endpoint that can be pulled by the Prometheus server. And so it's bundling them up. So when it gets hit by a request, it says, here's the latest stats.
Okay, so that's it. It's bundling it up. That was my question. So there's some sort of cache, something happening, some sort of collation of information.
Yes.
It's not just a Prometheus HTTP API type thing that it's hitting.
Correct.
It's actually something going.
Because it's making sure it actually knows where all the stats are and how to grab them, and it's making sure they're available.
That was my question.
It can return, 100 millisecond response when it's pulled to saying, here's all the stats, and you can just pull it, hopefully.
Would you say that's the equivalent of a Prometheus formatted get info? I mean, which is still just providing stats related to what the node sees at this particular time. It's not doing any of that logic and calculation of anything more than the get info is it? It's just saying, you asked me on this endpoint for information, just like get info. Here's the real-time info. Right. And of course, Prometheus every 60, 30 seconds, whatever, pulls it.
Yes.
But I mean,
I think that's a very good analogy.
Yeah, that's why you're right about saying it's a time series database. It's like, give me what tick are you at now? What tick are you at now? Kind of thing.
Now,
but it doesn't have any of that additional calculation like Nations and stuff does by scraping the logs of figuring out.
It could, in theory, it could. You could make it do that.
That's, I think, the next level.
Well, our problem right now is that every single node has got limited amounts of resources. So whatever we do, we need to make sure it's on a different thread or multiple threads thereof, and it's as light as possible, and it has some kind of cache that doesn't affect node operation.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the Heisenberg principle that says when you measure something, you actually distort its results. Yeah. And I mean, obviously, that's the age-old issue of systems monitoring and systems management. Like, if my processes that tell me how well the system is doing make the system run worse, is it worth running them or not? And
that's why I questioned Kevin's performance testings he was talking about. But
running this while we run the load generator would be interesting to watch what the Prometheus stats do when you're like pounding the living hell out of the thing.
The big thing to me, like as an example, is, and y'all just added it to like get info, is exposing some more of that local node info. That's the main thing it's doing right now is, oh, you want to know the earliest block in the log? Here it is in a JSON response. Now it's going to be coming out in raw Prometheus, and you don't have to go through that manual process of injecting it. Maybe like state history, log status, and things like that. But this is more like what Nations does and builds is, and Aloha is a little bit more intelligence and almost, like stateful tracking of the chain itself. I think it knows current net usage and you snapshot it and then trend it over time. But missed blocks, I guess, as an example. That's what you were talking about, Ross, right? I mean,
yeah, because there's two sets of stuff. There's monitoring the node itself and there's monitoring the chain. And maybe one of the requirements is, I'm really concerned about my, usage of my infrastructure. So I don't want to monitor the chain. I just want to monitor my node. Correct. Right. So I don't want to enable all those other stats. So that would be,
I suppose that's the other thing, Kevin, some kind of selected depth of monitoring in the plugin rather than just like, hey, you got everything here.
It's like some of the stats are really easy, like just monitor the disk space. Well, you just check that every couple of minutes. It's not a big deal.
And default to 90% and shut down. Oh, wait.
Well, who asked for that?
Who asked for that? That keeps coming up, man. It was you, bro. I just want to put it out there. It was you.
And it was the irony and make it official. I was the one that pushed so hard because it really does corrupt the hell out of the logs. I'd rather it shut down gracefully and send me an alert than.
Dude, I have lost nodes. Because of you. I'm blaming you for that.
I had the same.
I told you it's a privilege, not a burden.
Anyway.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry.
We've got about 20 minutes in the hour left. I wrote down so far one. It sounds like a feature request here. Let me know if I got that right. Ability to configure how deep you monitor.
So I don't even know if the team is actually even working on those chain monitoring things, or they're just working on basic things to just monitor the node, like the current node.
I envisioned it being phase 1 and phase 2. 1 is the node info, and y'all did a great job on get info and getting some extra stats out there. But I thought, we would kind of run through some of us that maybe do manually go and get info, where we go and get it, and it can probably be kind of rolled in as some of these options and parameters in your
let's see, Kevin, can you show what currently is planned in this first release of the Prometheus plugin as to what things are being going to be pulled back? Is it going to be just node-based data, or will there also be some chain-based data? And will it be configurable? I only want these parameters versus those. Obviously, you can throw ones you don't want away on the floor, but you're possibly causing more work on the node, or at least on the wire.
Yeah, I mean, the configurable is interesting. I guess we haven't even looked at that or thought about that. So if we're going to make it configurable, then that'll take some additional work. As of now, we're not really got to the point of really collecting much statistics. That's kind of what hoping we're getting from this meeting is what we're kind of interested in seeing. What we've been focused on so far is some of what's been alluded to, the fact that how do we gather statistics without impacting the node, or at least minimizing impact of that node? And so, we want the that endpoint to be on a different thread. So how do we get the information from, mostly the main thread over to this other entity in the most optimal way possible? And so that's pretty much what we have in place now. I think the approach we're using is working. So the approach is effectively that the main thread and other plugins, the various components of Nodius will effectively push into the Prometheus plugin the information that they're providing, and then the Prometheus plugin will gather that up and answer requests on a separate thread. So the impact there should be minimal in terms of thread contention. It's still going to be there. I mean, there's absolutely no way to get around that ultimately, but it should be, at least that's the theory, that it should be very minimal. Unless you're just pounding the hell out of the Prometheus endpoint, obviously. But I mean, I would expect that wouldn't be the case. That Prometheus will pull at some reasonable interval. And reasonable for us is we're producing a new block every half a second. So even every 100 milliseconds is probably not unreasonable to query something like this and it not really have a huge effect, because again, we're doing most of the lift on a separate thread. So what you want to gather, probably as a first blush, I'm thinking everything we're currently logging, or at least the stuff that Matthew has been gathering and putting in logs. That's probably the first blush. I think so far the only things that we've got, at least in the code that I've seen PR'd so far, I think the only two things we have is just kind of proof of concept is number of connected peers. I think is basically all we're currently tracking. But obviously we want to expand that. And once we have the framework, expanding it should be easy, right? It's just a matter of, oh, you want this? Okay, we'll add it, and that part gets easier. It's getting all the plumbing and everything in place to make that then easier.
My thought was, I've got, I went down this path of building our own, check this data, and oh crap, I got to check this because I forgot about it or it burned me. I can kind of rattle off as an operator what some of the things I was looking and checking and displaying, as well as where I had to go and get it, or where I ended up finding it. If that's helpful. I mean, I know we only have limited time, but yeah, that's what I was kind of hoping we could rattle off and get into your head.
Well, just rattle off the list of what.
Yeah, let's get into the list. What do you guys want to see?
So, and some of it is in the get info. So, we track the version of the server. We track head block, lib, difference between the two. If it's out of sync, things like that. But I mean, that's all generic info that's kind of out there that's in get info right now. What is some additional that you couldn't get from the get info was we ended up going to the configs of the nodes to try to see what runtime it was running, because that was a big thing during WASM and JIT and all that shift over. Is OC enabled on the node, and then potentially even the number of threads.
All that kind of stuff. Yeah, okay.
Is console logging on, for state history and or API. The features, and I ran into this because it does have available features or whatever, but when you have 8,000 servers, I mean, my public endpoint doesn't show everything because it's going through 8 different servers providing all the different services. So I would go to the config and look and see, what does it have account DB enabled? What's the maximum ABI timeouts? What's the ACTP max? I don't remember which one exactly that is, but all the things that over the years,
all the switches. Yeah.
Why are you getting burned on that? Shit, I use the default, and it's a default of 30 milliseconds or something stupid. Last offset as a block producer. Damn, I didn't realize that was 40%. That needs to be 3% on this node. So things like that, where we really kind of had to parse through the config file of every single node and then expose it as local configuration options. So even account DB, because it wouldn't show up right.
Sorry, Marco, I just got to say, there are 3 things here, right? You've got physical node, and that's come up. That's the CPU, memory, network, all the actual physical node, right? Then you've added, how is Node.js configured? The configurous, the
what plugins is it running?
Node.js.
We pull all the plugins.
What plugins? It's what APIs are available in the node, right? And then the other thing is where obviously where Matthew comes in. What's the operation like, right? So that's 3 layers. We haven't ever spoken about 3 layers.
Well, we have. You're 4. Just catching up.
What's the 4th? Give us the next one.
Like the first one you talked about, really, it's about the machine itself, right? So if you look at network, you could do that from the cAdvisor Prometheus exporter, which gives you all the node exporter, depending on if you're in a container or the node, right? So the default Prometheus thing is that. So it provides all the operating statistics and all that stuff, right? For the node, for the whole machine or container, right? And then there's the Node.js version of that versus the machine. So I don't know, when you said you were a bit, I took it as a bit fuzzy. I didn't know which one you're referring to, right? So there's the server operations itself, then there's Node.js running on the server, then there's Node.js configuration, then there's the blockchain. So the first one is that I mentioned in that 4 list is really out of scope because that's already covered by other things.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't want to replicate that.
Yeah.
Right. And like I say, so these are the things that we really bolted in, just grabbed it on our own and shoved it into that layer 1 and said, hey, you've got the normal stuff. And now show me in a batch standard mechanism where I could pull it and show it and report and group. So those are a lot of things. And really it's just over the past 5 years of new features coming out and having stupid low default settings or, getting burned on, this is just the way you need to do it. And each chain is starting to adapt to, you don't run last block 30% on wax. You run like, or EOS, right? I mean, we trim it down to like 5% on some of these things, right? So it's just being able to see that without having to go and pull it out of the damn config file. Additionally, we also, and I think it's better, is the block logs. Is that a full node or is it not a node? Or, a trimmed light node, as well as way more exposure to even a tool. What's in the state history? Because I know you don't realize this, but you can get them your block log and your state history not actually
that's probably out of the scope for this conversation, other than whatever tool we use then make it available.
I added it as a scope on hopefully for the last conversation about a tool to be able to manage the state history file.
Yeah.
But I'm more talking about, I can tell you the only place you can get that information is when the node starts. In like the first 50 lines of the log, it does its validation and says these two log files have 2 through whatever. And then obviously you assumed it's march forward if it's not screaming at you about missing a block in state history. But again, that is even way more obscure. Great news is it's a much more resilient process, so it does fix itself much better. But that was something I couldn't even use a smoke test of the EOS-IO block log, which is how I used to get that info. Now GetInfo does provide that. But that for state history would also be nice as well. I don't even think it's anywhere in memory probably, but those are a lot of the big pieces I have. But, you know, parameters in your config file, as well as like Matthew even noticed, and sounds like logged, number of peers connected. I'll also say, you know, maybe even at a granular level, there's a difference between external peers coming in and internal peers going out. Obviously, Node OS knows that, but there is actually a difference fundamentally. Any other ideas now that, I mean, I know we're running out of time.
Well,
now that Ross,
I have a question actually about some of the things that you mentioned, like is Prometheus the right place for those things? Because we, at the beginning of this call, we said Prometheus is a time series database, and many of the things that you mentioned, are they, I have the question of, are they helpful to track in a time series? You know, I was sort of imagining more things.
We use it as a dashboard, so no, not all. It's just to expose it, and that's how we expose it.
But Prometheus doesn't expose it. Like Kevin, sorry, I think Ted, you said it's just an HTTP queryable place.
I'll say
Prometheus runs somewhere else, right?
Yeah, I would put it all kind of in the same concept as GetInfo, right? I mean, everything.
You're
just kind of querying it and saying
it's queryable with some kind of cache. And however Kevin and the team decide to put it in a constructive way for Prometheus to then go in and take that information out.
And I wouldn't even,
that's how I
everything
understand
that I mentioned, I was okay. I mean, it would clutter it up, but with it just being in GetInfo and in regular JSON, right? I mean, and then we parse it or whatever. But the problem is shit, even if you wanted to, it is all over the place and almost impossible. Centralize it, expose it, either in JSON, or really all this is doing is taking that same variable and exposing it via the Prometheus.
Am I on the right page, Kevin, Brian? Like, I mean, is that what you guys are saying?
Yeah,
it's available.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, we call it the Prometheus plugin, but it really is just a RESTful endpoint that gives you text data in a standard format.
Awesome.
The standard format is the Prometheus format. So that's the Prometheus part of it, is just that.
Right.
Could there be a GetInfo too?
We better give it a different name. Let's not call it Prometheus.
Well, and that's why I say, can you make it as a GetInfo 2 type of thing? Since we always.
I mean, you can make a different plugin for different data. The reason it's called Prometheus is the server that's actually calling for the data at the endpoint is an actual Prometheus server that's running either at EOS Nation or somewhere else. You can run it in your house and, hit the node. It's an open source server. You can download it and run it. And so you can have like on-off state information, and every time it pulls it, it says on. And you see this 1-0 line that just goes 1, and then someday someone turns that feature off and it switches to off. And what you would do with that is you'd look back at the last 24 days, 365 days, and you'd say, oh, this feature got turned off on April 14th or whatever, because it was on.
We even use it as a indicator of it has the HTTP plugin, whatever, right, or whatever, and it doesn't have this account DB. Show that as an issue that needs to be addressed.
So Ted, what the reason why I kind of came in at that angle is we've actually started building our own platform that's going to be public, or it is already publicly available for people to just spin up their own Docker instance of a monitoring solution. And that will definitely use this interface, but it won't be Prometheus that's querying it.
Right.
So, and that's why I'm saying that,
right.
if you can say it's suitable for Prometheus format.
Well, here's why. Here's why I would say you should call it Prometheus, because anyone in their right mind would have done this in JSON. And in JSON, you'd be like, oh, awesome. Here's a JSON payload of all this data that I maybe even did a GraphQL input to say which fields I wanted back. Well, wow, this thing's so amazing. But
why couldn't you maybe do both? I mean, in my opinion, the majority of the work and effort is
we have unlimited engineers and unlimited
just
budget,
like that.
and we have so many developers willing to write for so many different things.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
That we're going to do it all in parallel.
Correct me if I'm wrong. The majority of it is, mostly on the back end side of being able to go get this information, store it in a state somewhere, just like GetInfo currently can go and retrieve it. What format it gets spit out to is going to GetInfo to.
Yes, it's stored somewhere, and then on when it receives the get or the post, it collects it all.
I'll be honest,
puts it into this format.
I would be more, and I'm a Prometheus Grafana shop. I would be much more supportive of it being a GetInfo 2 in a standard damn JSON format that anything else.
Then we'd have to still create I get what you're saying. We're not saying that nothing will ever change in the future and you can't have the requirements. That's why we're talking to you. The thing is, the first request that came in that we're fulfilling was make it where it's Prometheus compatible, because the majority of people running these systems management nodes are running Prometheus. So I
think that last half of that might not be as
but it's what holistic. The request was. Like we could go into analysis paralysis and produce nothing.
I'm not analysis.
What we're doing is we're doing this first, and then we can change the format later.
Cool. I agree 100% with it. All I'm trying to do is make sure it gets on the later point, and that's what Ross is saying, is that it being in a Prometheus format only is actually pretty limiting in respect to
it's interesting
being in
because
like a JSON.
You both agree you run Prometheus, but
correct. That's why I'm telling you the irony of it. But it's
the issue we're trying to say is the people that made the request first were running Prometheus. We were shocked too at how backwards the Prometheus interface is. So that's what got built first. I agree with you. The marshaling of the data on the outbound response to the GET request is relatively straightforward as a follow-on, and we could put it in some JSON format. But the JSON format it comes back in will likely be compatible with nothing other than custom parsers that are written on the other end. This is at least compatible out of the box.
Okay, I get it. I get that. As long as that, if I can query some kind of text output,
we'll do the hard work. But yes, two of us as Grafana experts that use it actually are just trying to voice the amended.
Grafana
put it
actually
a little higher on the list, I would say.
Grafana is a separate package from Prometheus. Grafana just knows how to read the Prometheus database and make nice graphs.
You know what works for everybody? JSON. So and you've already got it.
It doesn't. Just JSON does not work natively in Prometheus.
Prometheus works for less. I promise you that.
Matthew, you're just happy because all your Prometheus stuff's going to be working great now.
Correct. That's all. It's ironic that we're probably one of the three biggest, Prometheus and Grafana shops. But it's more about I get that's how the request came in. I'm ecstatic. I'm thrilled to even just open this conversation. It's awesome.
Yeah.
A note is that Prometheus does have a query language that is exposed via REST API and can respond in a JSON format. So
that's for Grafana. That's for the piece above it, not to
correct. We can do more hard work. To be honest with you, it's easier for me to write a text parser and just strip out the stupid Prometheus.
We will make it work in JSON in probably the September release. How about that?
No, that's all good. Ted, I get it. You're getting quite defensive about the team and the Prometheus plugin. I get it. It's all good. It's all good.
How about this?
But don't worry, guys. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you.
So we've got 2 minutes left. Did we capture all of the requests here, or is this a conversation we should continue? Matthew, did you have any, or Ross, or anybody else? Anything that we missed in this list here?
Well, I think it probably needs more discussion.
So shall we continue this next week?
Yeah. Yes. I think that'd be good.
So.
I'm happy to also do a little bit of shuttle diplomacy and go around and ask some folks.
I was going to say, Brian, I like to talk. If you want to reach out to me, and I'll spend some time, not bother Ross with all my words.
Right. You can write up the things you want to see monitored. If you have,
don't tell me to put an issue in.
No,
that's how this all got started. Though. That's why Matthew's getting what he wants. He made it.
I get it. That's what I'm saying. I'm just riding on his coattails. Welcome to EOS USA.
All you have to do is post it in the chat, and Brian will put it in an issue for you. You don't have to even ever make an issue.
For the record, guys, I love this. I'm so excited. Thank you for everything.
For that matter, I will, I invite you to proactively send me stuff. This goes out to everybody on the call and anybody who's watching or checking the notes afterwards. You can message me directly. For those of you that I already know and speak to, I'll reach out to you as well and try to pull it out of you. So,
and if you want to send it to Brian anonymously, he'll review all the things he received since this call next week, and he won't out you as to that you wanted this really obscure thing, but we'll have it on the list, so you could do it annonously even.
All right,
we need some kind of resource order shutdown if we run out of disk space. Wait.
I think there's an issue to make that an absolute value versus a percentage, and I have updated that respectively. So it's been great,
Daniel.
Sorry I missed the last one. Thanks for everything.
Yeah. So let's wrap it up for today. We're at time. It was a productive discussion, and we'll continue it next week.
Awesome.
Same topic. Thank you, everybody. It was good chat.
Thanks, everybody.
Cool.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.